So this is a presentation about SHAPE, which is a patient experience application on FHIR. SHAPE stands for a Survey of Health and Patient Experience, because the initial use case for the application was to survey about natural health history and patient experience, particularly around people who are experiencing rare disorders, where gathering this data could be highly valuable. I'm Lance Jones. I'm a lead data scientist at IBM, and I currently am a technical project manager on projects within IBM Consulting in the federal sector. So today we'll talk about the SHAPE platform. This consists of a couple different applications. One is a mobile application. The other then is an administrator application for generating and deploying the surveys. The final step is an integration behind the scenes that allows a user of the application to connect to, consent, validate, and import a copy of their electronic health records to share with the coordinator or administrator of the SHAPE application. During DevDays, you can always talk to me in person through the Whova app, or my email is included there, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. All right, this is the overall SHAPE architecture. SHAPE exists of, as I mentioned, two main components: the administrator application, which is all of the blue components to the left, and then the survey component that administers the surveys to participants, which is the salmon/peach color to the right. The study coordinator is able to generate the surveys. They can set up respondents, communicate with the respondents. There's also an API that was created for the cloud backend that allows several accelerators to push information to the platform or to get information. For the SHAPE survey, this is a cross-platform survey. It can be a progressive web application online, or you can also deploy to both Android and iOS in order to take the surveys. This is an open source project. The FDA has posted this on their GitHub, and you're welcome to go to the link shown on the screen and download the code base to look at it yourself. So this is an example of the homepage that's deployed for this particular implementation of the platform. Again, this one is connected to the backend that we currently have for the SHAPE platform that we're using for several different studies. If you deploy it on your own, you can set up your own web page. Additionally, you can see it's the top picture is the progressive web app, where you can see, actually, no, that's the Apple Store. So you can see the Apple Store link, the Google Play Store link, and then the progressive web app is what you would see if you just view the application through your browser. The SHAPE application has your standard survey modalities that you would expect. It also allows for multi-participant profile management, and this was due to a particular need where you might have a participant that would be, say, a parent that might have multiple children. So you could collect data from one participant that would have multiple profiles that they would be responding about. It's also includes a consent process where you can upload a consent form for a particular study. It also has self-report options where you can have a little bit more free-form, not scheduled reporting for events that maybe are not scheduled. So for instance, you could have a self-report of a hospital having to have been admitted to the hospital, an emergency room, or particular unexpected testing that had to happen. You can have self-report updates, so it's not a predetermined survey or questionnaire, but one that's almost like a diary or a log that a participant can enter. There are also push notifications. So if you stand up the platform on your own, you can set these up, but a survey administrator is able to push to the app. And so you can see app notifications on your phone on both platforms, Android and iOS. You also can email or send text messages if you stand up those services. So there are multiple ways to engage participants, try to notify them on certain timing of questionnaires or surveys, or let them know about a new questionnaire that you might deploy. And then, as I mentioned earlier, it also supports EHR record sharing if you want to implement that. Here's an example of a couple of the screens that you can register your participants, have them create an account, which is the second screen. If I can move my mouse. The third is showing if a survey is deployed to a participant, they see the survey, they get details on whether, what percentage of completion it is. They can click into the survey and then go through your standard modalities for questions. Also, if you see toward the bottom of the page is a tab for self-report. That's where a health event questionnaire, which is that more free-form type of questionnaire, can be deployed. These can be customized, but right now that customization does require coding on the back end. It's also worth mentioning the survey questionnaires also do support fairly complex skip logic and conditional logic if you want to fork the survey for different types of questions. So for instance, male, female, different questions relating to different health events. The other side of the application is the backend, where an administrator can connect in. It is secured. We have it deployed on Google Cloud using Firebase as the backend, which does make it, of course, cloud-based and scalable. As I mentioned, you can communicate directly with patients or participants, but through SMS, push notifications, or email. And by dynamic questionnaires, we mean the ability to create conditional skip logic between the questions. We tried to make this a platform that could be as complex as the researchers would want to gain information about patients and their health and their experiences. The administrator app, here are a couple screenshots of the portal. This happens to be the primary administrator portal where you can generate a survey. And then here's a screenshot of where you can see the status of a survey. You can view the respondents, see progress, etc. All right, one component that's oftentimes desirable when you're interviewing or evaluating patient experiences is to have more granular data about health events. Recollections might not always be the same as what's in health records, or you may have areas where you want more complete data. The integration here is with a particular service that allows the patient to connect to an aggregator and authenticate through the aggregator. In our case, this is connected through OneUp Health, which is a service that exposes an API you can connect to, and they take care of managing, pointing to all of the individual FHIR endpoints that you can allow authorization by the participant. So the authentication step happens where your participant is able to go through their web portal, authenticate. That authentication is passed through to OneUp Health and then is shared with the application. To give that a little bit more detail, OneUp Health has a fairly large group of APIs, FHIR endpoints. They're, of course, pushing to have complete coverage. If your participant does not have a healthcare provider that's in their coverage, they would not be able to share their electronic health records. However, if they do find their provider, they are able to share their records. All right, the next slides show a couple of these. Oh yes, this is the actual back end for what's happening. So if you want to integrate OneUp Health in their API, first you can go to the developers portal. They have a place there where you can register your application. That gives you a client ID. That client ID is then shared to create a bearer token, which is a session token. So whenever somebody connects to the Shape application, they click to log on to share their health records. It's establishing a session that's identifying your application specifically to OneUp Health and that individual for that session, so they can authenticate, and it only lasts as long as that session for the authentication to go back and forth with our application. So this is a one-time share. It is not granted access past the one time that that Shape is able to pull in the EHR. All right, this shows a couple animations of going through these screens. So if you look on the one on the left, this is showing where you would click to link to your EHR, and you can see it shows that there is no EHR linked yet. The one on the right then shows where if you click the plus icon, which I'm circling with my mouse, if you click the plus icon, it then allows you to choose which participant you want to pull records in. And again, this is set up so that a parent would be able to have multiple children. You could pull in records for first child, second child, etc. So let this animation continue. So on the right, only one person, Michael, is set up. And so you'd be able to click Michael to be the account in Shape that you want to pull in records for. This then shows the query. So you would start by searching for where you would want to pull those records in. And let me do this a little bit better. So in this case, on the right side, they're searching for Clark Clinic, I think is the name. And then what you're seeing is it is at that point going out to the web site for the endpoint. So that's the endpoint of Clark Health. And that's where the patient or participant would be logging in and authenticating to that endpoint. So here, searching Clark Clinic, and now signing in. On the right, you go through a informed consent. This is now on OneUp Health's website. So this is where you can establish and consent to participating. It gives you details on the sharing that's involved, and the participant can choose to either continue or stop at that point. Then it pulls in the data. This shows they have the option to view the data. They can complete the process, or they can choose not to share at that moment. So there is a multiple step process for consent to share to the survey administrators. And then on the right, you see a receipt that there are now records in the app. And then finally, at the point where a survey has been deployed and the administrator wants data, we have several different ways you can export, but one that makes a lot of sense is to export using FHIR. Building a platform that can try to be any type of survey that an administrator would want, which is a very large goal, the extensibility of FHIR made perfect sense. So in this case, we have several different things to export. The questionnaires that you structure and that you intentionally put in front of a participant, hoping they fill out and they submit, you also then have those self-reports, those health event or diary type freeform. And you can have an unknown number of those across your participants. And then, of course, EHR data. All of these can then be exported. For both the self-report and the structured questionnaires, they're exported in HLSO FHIR questionnaire and questionnaire response resources. Behind the scenes, there are factories in the code that generate these for the export. All right, lessons learned. Managing multiple types of FHIR coming in from the API was a bit of a challenge. Not just getting that bearer token and managing the token back and forth between the OneUp Health API and our backend. You also need to be aware of what type of FHIR you'll be getting. It can be anything depending on the FHIR endpoint. And so managing that from the header and negotiating that and then storing it so that you can pass it through as part of our data delivery was a bit of a challenge. Harmonizing those is an ongoing effort. Currently, we don't supply any harmonization, but that is something that could be in the future. The linkages between the EHR portals is something that, fortunately, OneUp Health is continuing to expand. And then mapping the data elements was also something that took a bit of effort in order to make sure that all of the various types of questionnaires could be represented in the questionnaire response resource. And of course, the code's available for anybody who would like to look at that. So I took a little bit more time than I meant to, but do I have any questions?
There's no questions on Whova, but we have some in the room here, so we're going to pass around the microphone so that those listening online can also hear your questions.
So in the beginning, you showed something about the Shape app and
Yes.
the part about the EHR stuff. I'm curious about your take. It seems like Apple Health also does a little bit of that functionality.
Yes, it's
is there a
very
plan to
similar.
kind of merge all of that?
It is similar in this case. I have to recall if exactly what would be involved in merging the two, but in this case we used this as the API and partly as for the consent step. But sharing from the Apple Store, I'm not sure if what capability is there right now.
Okay.
I can just add to that. It's also because OneUp Health, we wanted to integrate with multiple user bases, not just on Apple Health Kit.
Oh, that's a great point. Yes, Apple is only the Apple side, but Android is another large portion of the users. And in fact, most of the users that we were working with were on Android. But that is a good example of what the interface is like if you've gone through the Apple Store, because that also has you search and then authenticate with your specific healthcare provider to their endpoint. So it's a very similar sequence of steps from the user's perspective.
Let's see, any other questions right now? Okay.
Again, the code base is open source. Feel free to take a look. And if anybody has any questions, my email is in the presentation.
Yeah.
I'm happy to answer those.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. That's the end of our session. Thank you.